All right, Shabbosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Adar, for our annual Talmud Torah sponsor, Tavshin Pehei, the Tilsim Mishpacha, for dedicating all the Shumer Drushos this year. Wishing a Mazel Tov to Yoshua Mordechai Tilson on his engagement to Amit Cohen. Mazel Tov to the Chazan and Kalam, may they be zochem to build a Bayis Neman B'Yisrael, which endures ad mea ve'esim shanim tovos. Our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Adar, Haba Alinu Latova, Stephen Terry Zinn, in loving memory of Terry's father, Dr. Harry Khan, Tzvi Hirsch Ben Yosef HaKohen, and the Ziv, Levin, and Berman families in memory of Mr. William Ziv, Zev Shmuel Ben Yisrael, Zichron Lebracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshama Sav and Aliyah, the families and Nechama, all of those who need a refuah should have one together with Kol Choli, Yisrael Kodesh Baruch should merit Hashem bring home all of our hostages, B'Shalom and B'Karav, and our holy soldiers should be successful. B'chol Ma'aseh Yedehem. But with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today. Some really incredible Gemara ahead of us. Today's daf is Ayin Vav 76, and we are picking up actually on Ayin Vav. We left off Ima, which is on 76a, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down from the top. Last word on the line. So remember again, we were introduced over here to the topic of streifa. Again, which types of relationships are punishable by streifa? And now, by the way, you've seen already the common denominator, the types of infractions punishable by streifa generally, again, are infractions which deal with immorality, which is the common denominator of everything we're dealing with over here. So remember, again, as we were going yesterday's daf, the Torah explicitly speaks about two relationships: a man marrying a white woman and her mother, or a woman and her daughter. So now we're building out the framework from there. So the Gemara says as follows: I mahu kalas asura, afi kalas asura. So we should say that just as a man is prohibited to his son's wife, so too he should be prohibited biblically to his wife's son's wife. So the Gemara is right. In other words, the same way that he's prohibited to his daughter-in-law, his direct daughter-in-law through his son, he should be prohibited to his daughter-in-law through her son. To which the Gemara says, Amar Abaye, Amakra, Eshes bin Chahu. I'm sorry, Eshes bin Chahi. So the pasuk says, no, he's prohibited to his daughter-in-law. Why? Because she is the wife of his son. Mishum eshes bincha tamechayvo, via tamechayvo mishum eshes bina. One is chayiv ultimately again because a woman is the wife of his son, but not chayiv because she is the wife of his wife's son. Suppose I say, just you see what we're doing over here? We're just trying to kind of figure out parallel relationships. So we know that a man is prohibited to his daughter-in-law. What's the definition of a daughter-in-law? Your son's wife. So now the Gemara said, okay, so why don't we say the parallel relationship, again, your wife's son's wife should also be asura to you. Now, I want to be clear. All of these relationships are asr. They're asr. The shaila is, are they asr mid'Rabbanan or are they asr mid'Oraisa? So your daughter-in-law through your son's wife is obviously asr mid'Oraisa. So the shaila is your wife's son's wife also asr mid'Oraisa? Which the Gemara seems to say no, because the pasuk says Eshes bincha. Rava says Bein l'man don mina umina, Bein l'man don mina va'oki ba'asra lo. Lo asya. So Rava says like this. The truth is, as we saw, this goes back to yesterday's daf. Remember, again, we have fundamental machlokes in general. How to darshan gzeira shavas? How do you darshan a gzeira shava? Do we say don mina umina, which means again, both say, remember that the ikr, like the target of the gzeira shava, or I should say, the defining definition of the gzeira shava comes from the source item, or no? Don mina v'uki ba'asra means ultimately the result really focuses on the destination of the gzeira shava. In other words, the second half of the gzeira shava. We'll see inside in just a moment. To which the Gemara Rava says, in reality, bein l'mandar don mina umina, bein l'mandar don mina v'uki ba'asra lo aseh. Either way, Rava says the truth is you can't really learn out this prohibition ultimately of wife's son's wife. Why? The Gemara says, the one who says, ultimately, when learning Gzeira Shava, focus on the initial halacha, and that really determines the defining characteristics and qualities. So you can say like this, Mahu kalas asura, just as a man. So let's just go with our typical case, right? Ruvain's married to Rachel, right? So remember again, Ruvain's kala, who's his kala? His kala is his daughter-in-law, right? So remember again, his son's wife. Mahu kalas asura, just as Ruvain, his daughter-in-law is asura to him. Afhinami kalas asura. So we should say so too. Rachel's son's wife should also be prohibited to Ruvain. The Gemara says, if that's the case, Mahu biskila, Afinam biskila, then we should say the same way if Ruvain has relations with his daughter-in-law, i.e. his son's wife, that is punishable by skila. So too again, if he has relations with his wife's son's wife, his daughter-in-law through his wife, it should also be punishable by skila. So the Gemara says, okay, Lamanda Amar skila chamura ika lemifrach, but according to the opinion that says that skila is the most chamer form of death penalty, there's a problem. What's the problem? We'll say first wide line, Ayin Vav Amud Aleph 76a. What's the problem? Maluhu shekein imo beskila. Again, I will say for Ruvain himself. So remember again, a relationship with his mother punishable by skila. Tomar bihi sheima b'sreifa. So the problem will say, see, the relationships don't line up, right? Remember again, we're trying to create a certain symmetry. I mean, granted, it's an immoral symmetry, but it's symmetry nevertheless between probative relationships on his side versus her side. So we're trying to line up essentially to say that just like he can't have relations with his daughter-in-law, i.e. his son's wife, so too again on his wife's side, he also is prohibited to his wife's son's wife. The problem just is we see that the symmetry doesn't line up. Why not? Take a look at mother for just a moment. If he has relations with his mother, it's skila. If he has relations with her mother, it's sreifa. It's sreifa, right? That's one of the explicit psukim that we saw in yesterday's daf, that you can't go ahead and marry or have relations with a woman and her mother. It's punishable by sreifa. So you see that the symmetry doesn't line up. Tomar bihi she'ein b'sreifa. V'od, furthermore, second wide line, v'od bita b'sreifa v'kalasa b'skila. Furthermore, again, if this construct would remain true, it means that if Reuven were to have relations with Rachel's daughter, it would be punishable by sreifa. Again, that's an explicit pasuk, a woman and her daughter, that's sreifa. And yet, again, kalasa, according to this logic, if he were to have relations with Rachel's son's wife, i.e. his daughter-in-law through his wife, it would be by skila. So again, just the punishments don't seem to line up. To which the Gemara says, it's not a problem. Hu atzmo yochiach. The truth is, that's not such a kasha. Why? The bita b'sreifa v'kalasa b'skila. We already see that the punishments are asymmetrical. Why? Because if Reuven were to have relations with his daughter, it's sreifa, and yet again, if he were to have relations with his daughter-in-law, meaning his son's wife, ultimately that would be skila. Ela mahu lo chalakta bo bein imo v'kalaso. The issue just is that, at least from Reuven's perspective, what's symmetrical is the prohibition a generation above and a generation below, right? So in other words, for example, his mother and his daughter-in-law from his son are symmetrical. They're both b'sreifa. So alamahu lo chalakta bo bein imo lekalaso. So just like for Reuven himself, again, Rabbi say, because remember we saw in yesterday's daf, so much of what we're doing in these prohibited relationships is creating the continuity with generations above and generations below. So when you look from Reuven's perspective, so again, when we look at the prohibition regarding his mother and his daughter-in-law, i.e. his son's wife, the punishments are the same. Afhi lo sachlok bein imo lekalaso. So again, really on her side, it should be the same thing. We should say that it should be the same punishment if Reuven has relations with Rachel's mother or Rachel's daughter-in-law through her son. The Gemara says, according to the opinion that says that sreifa is more chamer, ultimately, again, based on this question, we would not be able to darshan this entire thing. Okay, so the Gemara says that's the first side of this. The second side of this, Dun mina, the uki ba'asra, and according, remember again, this is all Rava's construct. Because all Rav is conscious. So remember, just to keep our eye on the ball over here. So remember, we're trying to figure out over here, the Gemara is trying to make a suggestion that just as Ruvain is not allowed to have relations with his daughter-in-law, in other words, and daughter-in-law is defined by his son's wife, the Gemara wants to suggest that there should be a symmetrical prohibition to his wife's son's wife. His daughter-in-law through his wife. The Gemara is suggesting over there, Rav is saying the truth is, whichever way you dash in a Gzeira Shava, it's not going to work. This limud is not going to work. So for example, the man Damar, don't mina v'oki ba'asra. So again, according to the opinion that Darshan is a kal v'chomer by saying that literally again, the defining characteristics ultimately of the Gzeira Shava are really going to be defined by what we'll call the destination of the Gzeira Shava. So he said like this, Mahu kalasa asura, just as Ruvain, right? Ruvain's daughter-in-law is prohibited to him. He's not allowed to have relations with his son's wife. Afhi kalasasura. So we should say the same thing. He can't have relations with Rachel's son's wife. Voki ba'asura. So the Gemara says, okay, then let's focus on the destination of that Gzeira Shava. Hasam hudu b'skila. So remember again, if Reuven were to have relations with Rachel's son's wife, that would be skila. That'd be skila. Aval hacha b'sreifa. But over here, if he were to have relations with his own daughter-in-law, i.e. his son's wife, that's sreifa. Kida ashkichan bi'ima. As we find with his mother, because remember again, on Reuven's sides, things are symmetrical. Because remember, if Reuven has relations with his mother, generation up, or has relations with his daughter-in-law, generation down, same punishment, sreifa. Sreifa. The Gemara says, Lamanda Amar, skila chamura ikal mifrach. So according to the opinion that says that skila is more chamur, we could ask the following question. Maluhu shekin imo beskila. Right? So when it comes to Reuven, right? So with his mother it'll be beskila, tomar bihi, she'ima besreifa. But yet with her, with Rachel's mother, it'll be besreifa. Vod, mahu chalak the bo bein bito la kalaso, afi tachlok ba bein bita la kalaso. So we should say the same thing, the same way that there's this thing in the prohibition for Ruvain between his daughter and his daughter-in-law. So it's on Rachel's side. There should be a distinction between his daughter and daughter-in-law. Ulamanda Amar Nami Sreifa Chamura. And according to the opinion that says that Sreifa ultimately is more chamur than Skila, Mehai Kushya Loni Dunin. From this, based on this question, we can't darshan the proper halacha. So therefore, I will say, interestingly enough, the Gemara does not seem to be able to prove this idea. Right? So remember, what's the idea the Gemara wanted to prove? The Gemara wanted to say that the same way that Reuven's daughter-in-law from his son, right, his son's wife, is punishable by sreifa. So too, again, his daughter-in-law through his wife. No, I'm sorry, I think I said it wrong. Reuven's daughter-in-law, i.e., his son's wife is punishable by sreifa. So there should be a parallel prohibition that his daughter-in-law from his wife, Rachel's son's wife, should also be punishable by sreifa. So remember again, both Abaye and Rava agree that is not halacha. Abaye says it based on a pasuk. Rava says either way, the Gzeira Shava is not going to work. The Gzeira Shava doesn't pan out. Okay, so the Gemara adds on. So once again, it doesn't mean it's not prohibited. It's still usher. It just means that the Gemara is suggesting that it may not be a prohibition of sreifa. Okay, so the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, "Bita me'anasas minayin." But here's an interesting case. What happens if Reuven violates Rachel? He violates her, and then what happens? He violates her, and they have a daughter. So how do I know that halacha l'maisa, if Reuven has relations with that daughter, that's punishable by sreifa? That's called bita me'anasaso. So his daughter, as a result of a woman that he violated. Minayin, how do we know that such a relationship like that is punishable by sreifa? To which the Gemara says, Amra Abaye kavachomer. It's kavachomer. Now what's the kavachomer? Abbas bito anush abito lokol shekin. It's obvious. If Lamaisa, Reuven is held liable for relations with his granddaughter, Bas Bito, then what? Alachas kama v'kama, all the more so, he is held accountable for relations with his daughter, even if that daughter ultimately, again, is the result of a violation of violating her mother. So the Gemara says, one second, you can't do that. You can't create. Once we have this concept that you can't create kal v'chomers, you can't create kal v'chomers through you can't create capital punishment through a kal v'chomer. Capital punishment has to be understood directly. So the Gemara says, no, you're right. Gilui milsa ba'ami. No, it's not really a kal v'chomer. We'll say this is obvious. This is obvious. The Torah holds a man accountable for relations with his daughter. It's punishable by sreifa. It doesn't really make a difference how this woman is his daughter, whether she's his daughter from a legitimate marriage or whether she's his daughter because he violated her mother. Either way, a daughter is a daughter is a daughter, and therefore there is going to be liability for relations with her. Incredible. Rava says, Amrli Yitzchak Baravdimi, Asya Heina, Asya Zima. Okay, Rava on the other hand disagrees, and Rava learns that from a double Gzera Shava of Heina, Zima. Okay, Tani Avua de Rabbi Avin, Lefi Shalo Lamadnu, Lebita Manasasu, Hutzrach HaKosov Lomar, Ubas Ish Kohen. So let's listen to this. So the Gemara says, because we did not learn out, right? We don't have an explicit drasha. There's no explicit pasuk that says that if a man has relations with his daughter, who he fathered through violating her mother, that if he has relations with her, he is chayiv streifa. Because there is no explicit pasuk that says that, Hutzrach HaKosov Lomar, the pasuk needs to say, Ubas Ish Kohen. So the Gemara says, "Ima bas kohen he b'sreifa, vein bola b'sreifa." So listen to this. What I'll say. So remember, the pasuk over here is talking about a bas ish kohen, right? So again, this is the daughter of a kohen who commits znus. So remember, we had this sugya a while back. Is this talking about erisin? Is it talking about nisuin? So bepashtos is talking about an arusa, right? And if a bas kohen who is an arusa commits adultery, the halacha is she is judged with sreifa. Not just a unique halacha. So the Gemara says, "Ima bas kohen he b'sreifa vein bala b'sreifa." So now a bas kohen, she herself, is judged with sreifa. But l'maaseh, interestingly enough, the man with whom she commits adultery is not judged with sreifa. Af bita me'anasaso. So to again, the daughter that he has from violating her mother, he b'sreifa, she is judged with sreifa. Vein bala b'sreifa. But ultimately, again, the man with whom she commits adultery is not judged with sreifa. Amar Abaye says, the pasuk says, Es aviha he mechaleles. She is profaning her father. Misha mechaleles es aviha. So who is judged with sreifa? One who profanes her father. Yotza sazu she'avia mechalela. This would come to exclude one. It's not the girl who's profaning her father, but rather what? It's her father who's profaning her. Rava says, Bishlama Hasam Afikse Medina de Bas Kohen, V'ukimta Adina de Bas Yisrael. So Rava says, okay, in that case you could say the girl is being removed from the typical case of a Bas Kohen, and she's being judged in accordance with the standards of a typical Bas Yisrael. Hacha Adina de Man Mukmasla, Adina de Pnuya Mukmasla. Here in the case of Bita Manasaso. So again, when the daughter of a woman who he violated. So the mice again, where are you going to put her? Right, you're going to put her in the category of just a regular single woman. That doesn't make any sense. As Harshabo says, therefore again, the Gemara learns out that Allah Maisa, just as a man is chayiv streifa for violating his daughter or for having relations with his daughter. So too, a man is chayiv for relations with his daughter, even if she is the daughter of a woman whom he violated. That's the takeaway over here. As harli bitam anasas minayin, where's the lav? Where's the lav? Remember again, as we see the way the Torah is structured is, in order to hold someone liable in a capital case, there needs to be two things. There needs to be a lav, right? And that's right. There needs to be a prohibition, and there needs to be an onesh. So where's the lav? Where's the lav? As harli bitam anasas minayin, bishon la abai v'rava. So according to Abai and Rava, mehecha dinafkaluhu onesh mehasam nafkulas har. So according to Abai and Rava, the same pasuk that teaches us the punishment is the very same pasuk that teaches us the lav. Ella the Tani da Avod Rabbi Avin mai. But I will say, what about the Tana of Avod Rabbi Avin? Where does he learn out from? Amar Rabbi Loi Amar Kra al techalal es bitcha lahaznosa. The pasuk says, do not profane your daughter and have her commit an act of immorality. Or literally again, literally translated, do not profane your daughter that has no son, have her become a harlot. So we'll say, so again, that pasuk is going to teach us that halacha l'maisa, a father can't have relations with his daughter, even if that daughter is not from a legitimate marriage, but even if that daughter herself is from a woman whom he violated. Okay, incredible. So Maskif Rabbi Yaakov, Achud, Rabbi Acha Bar Yaakov, Hai al techalal es bin chalaz nosah lahachiyuda asa. No, that's not what that pasuk means. Rabbi say that pasuk is for something else. In other words, so now, look what's happening over here. We're trying to figure it out, right? We've established that halacha l'maisa, if a man violates his daughter, who he fathered with a woman whom he violated, he is chayiv misa for that. He's chayiv streifa. Where's the lav? So according to Abaye and Rava, it's the same. The lav is the same source as the actual onesh. Okay. According to the other opinions, what's the lav? The lav is on the pasuk of al techalal es bitcha lahaz nosa. Do not profane your daughter by having her engage in acts of harlotry. What's the harlotry over here? What's the znos? Relations with her father. To which the Gemara says, well, hold up. We use that pasuk for something totally different. I will say, total detour now. We use that pasuk for something totally different. So the Gemara says, Hi al techalas bitan lahachiyudasa. No, Hi mi baile l'chidisanya. We actually need that pasuk for something dramatically different. What do we need it for? Here we go, the chidisanya. As we learned, al techalas bitcha lahaz nosa. Do not have your daughter engage in an act of harlotry. Listen to this. Yachol b'kohen hamasi es bito l'levi v'Yisrael hakas medaber. So we'll say this is fascinating. One might have thought that the pasuk is actually talking about that a kohen is not allowed to have his daughter marry a Levi or a Yisrael. Wow, right? It's about the preservation of yichus. Then maybe again to preserve proper yichus, a bas kohen should only marry a kohen, and marrying a Levi or a Yisrael would chas v'shalom be like an act of harlotry. To which the Gemara says, Tamulomar lahaznosa. Therefore, the pasuk says the father should not give his daughter over lahaznosa. Bechilo shebiznus hakasav medaber. We're talking about the idea that most of the time the Gemara is understanding it over here. That Allah Chalamaysa is giving your daughter over into a context where ultimately, again, she's going to be engaged in znus. So what does this refer to? B'moser es bito l'shalo l'shem ishus. It means giving over one's daughter, not for the sake of marriage. Not for the sake of marriage. That Allah Chalamaysa again, so it's the prohibition upon a father to give his daughter over to a man, not in the context of marriage, but for some immoral purposes. To which the Gemara says, Im kain, lema kra al tachel. If that's the case, let the pasuk just say al tachel, singular. Do not profane your daughter, singular, by giving her over to a non-marital context. So Gemara says, my al techala, what does the plural mean? Shma min atartis. Come teach me two things. So we'll say, so number one, you can't go ahead and give your daughter over to a man in a non-marriage context. And I will say also, number two, it also teaches me that what? That Allah Chalamaysa, a father can't have relations with his daughter, even if he fathered her by violating her mother, because such an act of relations will be an act of profanation, right? It'll be an act of profaning her. That's the halacha. Okay. So the Gemara says, it's actually fascinating. The Gemara goes on a little bit of a detour over here. And remember again, Abaye and Rava, they learned out bito me'anasaso from a totally different source, right? They learned out bito me'anasaso from the same place where they derived the onesh. So if that's the case, what do Abaye and Rava do with this pasuk? This is very interesting. So Abaye and Rava, fascinating. Am Rav Mani, ze hamasi es bito lezaken. Fascinating. This refers to someone who marries off his daughter to an older man. What's wrong with marrying off your daughter to an older man? Kidisanya, al techalal es bitcha lahaznosa. Do not profane your daughter by giving her over to immorality. Rabbi Eliezer Omer zehamasi es bito lezaken. This refers to someone who goes ahead and marries off his daughter to an older man. Now, what's the concern? If you take a look at Rashi, Rashi says, "Masi bitlo zaken." It's two hands up from the bottom. Umitoch she'enu mekabla, so mizane alavhu, mizane hi alav. What's the concern over here? If she's very young and he's very old, what's the issue going to be? The issue is going to be is she's going to have a desire for intimacy. He's not going to have a desire for intimacy. So what's going to happen? She is going to seek fulfillment outside of her marriage. So you're setting up a situation that is destined to put her in a very precarious state. So therefore, again, the Torah says, when marrying off your daughter, do not put her in a situation where she's going to commit suicide. We'll say, it's fascinating. It's fascinating how just the Torah understands human nature. Obviously, Baruch created us. So the Torah understands that people crave intimacy. People crave intimacy, and if they can't find it in the context of their marriage, just the way it's going to work is they're going to look for it elsewhere. Again, Torah obviously is not condoning that type of behavior, but the Torah is understanding that that is the way people work. So therefore, again, the Torah is telling the father, do not marry your daughter off to an older man, because if you do that, you are setting, almost like a lifnei iver, you are setting her up ultimately, again, to seek out that intimacy outside of the permitted confines of her marriage. So the Gemara goes, Rabbi Kiva, different. Rabbi Kiva Omer, Zahamasha es bito bogeres. Fascinating. This refers to someone who delayed marrying off his daughter until she's a bogeres. Right? The idea is you should marry off your children early, and if a father purposely delays marrying off his children, so that's ultimately, again, setting her aside for a life of znus. So this is very interesting. If you look at Rashi here as well, Rashi says, Masha bito bogeres. Actually, sorry, not yet. Actually, take a look, 2 lines up from the bottom. Za Masha bito bogeres. So there's actually a fascinating girsa here in Rashi. Rashi says, Shemis ave lahafkira umizaneh. So I would say, so the wording in Rashi itself is very strange. What does it mean? Shemis ava means desires lafkira, to make her hefker umizana, and therefore she commits znus. What does that mean? So if you look, by the way, at the Hagos with Siyunim, they change it by the letter Pei. He quotes to Rashash, who says, Rashash magia lahafkida. So we'll say, as we're going to see in Amabez a little bit, this is fascinating. Why would a father delay marrying off his daughter? Because, listen to this, from the Gemara's perspective, when there's a daughter in the house, the father has free domestic help. Free domestic help. If he goes ahead and he marries off his daughter, what happens? Suddenly now, he's got to go ahead and pay for domestic help. See, he delays marrying her off for his own benefit. When a father does that, so it's interesting from the Gemara's perspective, what that's also going to do is set her up possibly for znus. She's going to crave that intimacy, going to crave that closeness, and therefore, halacha l'maaseh, he's setting her up for znus. We'll see more about that in just a moment. So the Gemara says, Amrav Kana Mishum Rabbi Akiva. The last two lines on the. So I just want to point out from the same pasuk, right? So Al Techala es Bitchala has no sa. Do not profane your daughter by putting her into a life of znus. What does it mean? So first opinion, it means don't marry your daughter off to a much older man, because again, their drives are not aligned, and she's going to seek fulfillment outside of the confines of the marriage. Rabbi Akiva, don't delay marrying off your daughter for your own purposes, because you're going to drive her to znus. Incredible. Amrav Kana Mishum Rabbi Akiva. Listen to this. Ein lecha ani b'Yisrael ela rasha arum v'hamashe bita bogeres. So this is fascinating. There is no poor person in Klal Yisrael who is not a rasha arum, a cunning evildoer, right? The cunning rasha, or someone who delays his daughter from getting married. So the Gemara says, "Amasha bita bogeres lav rasha aramu." Now, what does this mean? This doesn't mean every single poor person is a cunning rasha. What it means is every cunning rasha ultimately becomes becomes an ani, becomes impoverished. Just like every single man who delays marrying off his daughter for his own purposes ultimately becomes impoverished. Why? So the Gemara says, we've all explained in just a moment, the Gemara says, Atu, Hamasha bitu oger slav rasha aramu. But understand, a guy who delays marrying off his daughter, isn't he a cunning Russia? In other words, we'll say, what are you talking about over here? We're talking about a guy, the father could say, I haven't found the right shidduch. I haven't found the right shidduch. My daughter, she's so wonderful. Meanwhile, he's purposely delaying her prospects. Why? Because he wants to go ahead and halacha l'maisa suit his own needs. That's what's happening over here. That's what's driving all of this. Is that not a cunning Russia? Amar Abaye will say Amar Beis. Amar Abaye, Hagim Razul means to say, Eizehu ani Russia arum. What's an example of a person who is a cunning Russia who's going to be impoverished? Zeh hamasha bita bogeres. This ultimately is someone who intentionally delays marrying off his daughter to go ahead and satisfy his own needs. So I will say, just want to point out just how profound this is. What does this mean? That someone who delays marrying off his own daughter, right, is going to go out and become an ani, or someone who's a cunning rush is going to become an ani? What's the pshat? So what's the common denominator between these two people? Common denominator is putting your own needs before the needs of the other, right? So the father who goes ahead and says, you know what, I don't want to marry my daughter. My daughter's ready to get married, but I don't want to marry her off yet because, again, it doesn't suit my needs. It doesn't suit my needs. So we'll say that's putting your own needs before your child's needs. Who is the cunning Russia? The cunning Russia is a person, as we'll see in just a moment, is a person who puts his own needs in front of other people's needs. So we'll say, so a person who prioritizes his needs over other people's needs, there's a cosmic justice in the world. Because Baruch Hu says, you're putting your own agenda of self-advancement in front of your own child and in front of other people. What ends up happening to such a person? What ends up happening? They become impoverished. They become poor, maybe not immediately, but over time. Why? Because that's not how HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants a Yid to act. The Rebbeinu Shalom does not want us to be self-serving. And I both say, this is incredibly important in general. First of all, there's a tremendous parenting lesson that's involved here. A lot of times as parents, without even realizing it, we put our own needs before our children's needs, right? We have this vision for our children about what we want them to become, right? And I need them to become educated like this, and I want them professionally to do this, and they can't get married until they reached this threshold or this or this or that. Now, by the way, sometimes that's great, but sometimes what we don't realize is that's not what my kid needs. That's what I need. That's what I need. And that's selfish behavior. That's putting your own needs before your child's needs. And again, I will say it's one of the hardest things in life to figure out, like, am I taking these positions because they're actually better for my child? Or am I taking these positions because they are actually better for me? And it's hard because a lot of times our own needs and our children's needs kind of become intertwined and intertangled. But you see from here, one of the things you have to be so careful about in parenting is making sure, let's say, one of the greatest Yetzer in parenting. What's one of the greatest Yetzer in parenting is often as parenting we think like, our kids represent a do-over for ourselves, right? Everything that I did wrong in life, I'm going to get right through my kids. Well, that's fine, but your kid's not you. And your kid didn't sign up to become a better version of you. My child is someone different, fundamentally different than me, with different kochos, different abilities, and a different destiny. So we have to be so careful. I see this all the time. Parents like have these incredible, beautiful dreams, which are so beautiful. Only issue is they never checked with the kid whether or not it's actually what the kid wants to do. Does the kid want to go down this derech? Does the kid want this kind of chinuch? Does the kid want this kind of education? Does the kid want this kind of career? The parent is all convinced that this is what the kid's going to do. They just never check with the child. That's putting parental desires and life objectives before the child, and that, Chazal say, is fundamentally selfish. And when you're selfish in life, just understand, it never works out. The Rasha Arum puts his own needs before the needs of others. You could try that, and you may be successful in the short term, but in the long term, ultimately, you'll become ani, you'll become impoverished. Rabbi will say, but the yesod of parenting is make sure that the decisions you're making are the ones that are good for your child, and not the ones that simply benefit you. Incredible. All right, let's go weiter. So the Gemara will say, kind of following up on that, the Gemara says, V'amrav Kahana Mishon Bi'Akiva Havizar Minei Ya'otzcha Lefi Darko. Be careful about getting advice from someone who is only giving you advice ultimately again because it benefits them. That's Hayotzcha, someone who gives you Eitzah Lefi Darko, in accordance to this Rabosai. So this is an incredible caveat, right? Because what does the Rasha Arum do? The Rasha Arum is not someone who's just stuffing chazer into your mouth. The Rasha Arum is a person very often who could be giving you advice, and it may not be even the worst advice for you, but it's not the best advice for you. But you know who it is the best advice for? For him. For him. And same idea, sometimes without even realizing it, the chinuch we give to our children, or the advice we give to our children, is the advice that benefits us. Benefits me as the parent, lav dafka, that it benefits my child. So Rabbi Akiva is kind of the follow-up. Be careful with someone who gives you advice in accordance with their derech. I will say, by the way, it's also very profound to hear this from Rabbi Akiva. Right? Remember again, Rabbi Akiva knows what it's like to get advice from different people, because in Rabbi Akiva's life, there were two different groups of people, really just one group and then one person. There was one group of Rabbi Akiva who constantly and perpetually told him, you will never amount to anything more than a shepherd. That's what you were, that's what you will be. Just be the best shepherd you could be. Right? And those are people, and Rabbi Akiva had one person who whispered in his ear. That one person happened to be his wife, Rachel. Right? And Rachel told him, you could be whatever you want to be. Right? You want to become the good lador. You want to become you want to become the best of the best. You can do that. You can do that. So Rabbi Akiva, and it's so profound. Rabbi Akiva essentially says, just be careful who you get advice from, because had I listened to the majority of people who were whispering in my ear, I would have been a very good shepherd. And that's it. But Baruch Hashem, I took advice from someone who wasn't self-serving, but rather I took advice from someone who really and truly cared about me, and as a result, Rabbi Akiva became Rabbi Akiva. Incredible. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Amarav, Hamasi is Bita Zakein. If a person goes in and marries, so back to this. A man marries off his daughter to a much older man. V'amasi isha lebno katan. Or, again, I'm going to say the reverse is, a man marries a woman to his minor son. Remember, as we spoke about, minor son is not the kid you love less, right? But minor son represents, again, a child. So he's marrying off again an adult woman to his minor son. So we'll say, so remember again, the common denominator in these over here is, again, they're going to be unfulfilling marriages, right? In the first, the daughter's married to a much older man, they don't have the same drive. Again, in the second, the son, who's a child, is married to a woman, don't have the same drive. Or listen to this, V'amachsir aveda lakusi, or someone who goes out of his way to return a lost object to a non-Jew. What's that? The Gemara says, Alava Kasav Omer, about such a person, the pasuk says, Leman Safos Harava Esatzmeya, Lo Yova Hashem Saloachlo. They're both saying, now, the way the pasuk is Parshas V'Eschalon, the way that the Gemara is understanding this pasuk over here, which is really quite profound. Laman sefos harava satzmeya means that, look at Rashi. Rashi says, Laman sefos lichbar. Rashi understands sefos means to connect. Now, what's being connected over here? Rashi says, last white line in Rashi on the top, Revos hatzmeya, savea bedavar, im tzamei ledavar, zakin v'yalda zol smeya l'tashmish, v'zakin v'sei v'gal v'katan. So let's listen to this. According to the Gemara's understanding as follows. You can't connect someone who is thirsty with someone who is sated and expect them to go ahead and complement each other. So in other words, so the idea over here is, right, so the young woman is thirsty. She wants intimacy. The older man is sated. The young boy is sated. The woman is thirsty. It doesn't work. It doesn't work to pair up someone who is thirsty with someone who is sated, because halacha l'maisa, again, it doesn't work. And I will say, by the way, it happens to be that this is a profound yesod, not just by intimacy, but also by marriage. As I will say, in order to have true shalom bayis, in order to have true growth in a marriage, both parties in the marriage have to want growth. Right? The worst thing that could happen is when a wife becomes her husband's mashkiach. Right? In other words, if a wife is kicking her husband out of bed in the morning, get up for shir, get up for shir, get up for shir, that's a disaster. That's a disaster. The same way if a husband is telling his wife, you know what, you really need to become a chatzos lady, you need to be starting Shabbos, you need to be ready for Shabbos at midday on Friday, that's also a disaster. What's the recipe for success? Both have to be thirsty. Both have to be thirsty. Husband has to be thirsty for growth. A wife has to be thirsty for growth. That's a successful marriage. If one is thirsty and one is sated, it's very difficult. It's very difficult because one is always going to be pushing, one is always going to be wanting, and the other one ultimately is going to become resentful. If both are thirsty, then Lamaisa, that's the recipe for success. If both are sated, then what? Utter disaster also. Because if both are sated, then that represents a life of complacency, a life of mediocrity. Both are thirsty, ridiculous success. Both are sated, abysmal failure. One is thirsty, one is sated, a lot of shalom bayis issues. So the Gemara goes right there. What about the machzir aveda l'kusi? What's wrong with going ahead? What's wrong with going ahead and returning a lost object to a non-Jew? I don't know. That sounds like a nice thing. What's wrong with that? So we'll say if you look at Rashi, Rashi says over here, machzir aveda l'kusi hishva v'chiber kusi liyisrael. Umare ba'asmo sha'shavas aveda enechashul. Both say, listen to this. This is incredible. We'll say, of course, you should return lost objects to non-Jews. That's what the Gemara is saying. The Gemara is saying is like this. That a person who thinks that returning a lost object to a non-Jew is just as important as the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, that's wrong. That's wrong. As Rabbi said, we're going to say something that is incredibly politically incorrect, which is Jews and non-Jews are not the same. We're not the same. And we should not interact with each other as if we are the same. You have to have respect for all of humanity. You have to treat all of humanity with dignity. But I will say, but there is a different level of interaction and a different level of devotion that we must have to each other. And I will say, we don't have to be apologetic about saying it. For one simple reason. No one looks out for us except us. And no one has our back except us. And I will say, for so many of us, our senses were dulled to this, right? We thought again, after the Holocaust, never again, everybody loves us, anti-Semitism is not what it used to be, and then October 7th happened, and we realized the world is the same exact world that it has been for thousands of years. And give the world a chance to annihilate Jews, and they'll take it. And give the world a chance to go ahead and turn into anti-Semitic lynch mobs, and they'll do it. And it doesn't matter what country it is, and even as great as this home is to us, the anti-Semitism is rampant. And it teaches us one simple lesson: circle the wagons. Look out for each other, because no one else is going to look out for us but us. So if you're one of those kumbaya people, right, and tikkun olam, and everything, yes, and we're one big community of humanity, you're a fool. We're not one big community of humanity. We're not. There's us, and there's them. And that's the way the world works. Now, when Mashiach comes, Emirat Hashem, that'll change. And when Mashiach comes, it will be v'yasa kulam aguda achos. Humanity will become one. But until that day, humanity is not one. There's Klal Yisrael, and there's everyone else. It's Am Levadad Yishkon. We are alone in this world. But again, the beautiful part is we're alone as a nation, but we're not alone as individuals, because we have each other. And we always have each other. And this is what the Gemara says. If you think just like, if you approach Hashavas Aveda, the community of mankind, right? The Gemara says, you're a fool. You're a fool. That's not true. There's not, one day there will be a community of mankind. And I want to say, again, to be clear, the obligation of dignity and the obligation of respect to every single person. But just understand that there is a different system of conduct and a different system of allegiance and a different system of commitment that we have to one another, because all we have is each other. We have no one else but each other. And the moment we forget that is the moment we put ourselves in an overwhelmingly precarious situation. So that's the Gemara means. Should you return a lost object to a kusi? Of course you should. If you get extra change at the supermarket, should you return the extra change? 1,000% Rabbi say. Yes. And don't tell me, if you get extra money, right? You be a proper human being. But just understand that there's a difference between that and the mitzvah of Hashavas Avedi, which represents the interpersonal contract that we have with one another. Incredible. His Gemara is like ridiculous. A man who loves his wife like his own body, and one who gives her covered more than himself. You hear this? You have to love your wife like yourself, right? But yet you have to honor her more than yourself. Now, what does that mean? Why doesn't it say you have to go ahead? It's so great also. I have something to say about Sheva Brachas. Hey, what does this mean? First of all, why don't we say love your wife more than yourself? What's the simple answer? Because you can't. This is important yesod, right? In other words, we'll say the framework of love that I have more than anything is myself. In other words, the strongest reflex we have within ourselves is self-preservation. Why? Because deep down, like the most important, we're very egocentric beings. So the Gemara says, if you could love your wife as much as you love yourself, that's godless. That's godless. Now, what does it mean to be mechabed? Now, because love is an emotion. So from an emotional perspective, you could feel that sense of love to your wife. And you could feel you care about her as much as you care about yourself. That's fantastic. Mechabda, covet, is our physical behaviors. Right? In other words, interesting, when it comes to physical behaviors, then you have to do more for your wife than what you do for yourself. And I will say that's on a very like individual level. So if you for yourself, you get a present on your birthday, so your wife shouldn't only get a present on her birthday, but she should get a present multiple other times. In other words, whatever covet you take for yourself, you like certain new things, whatever you like, make sure that your wife has even more than that, because covet is physically measurable. So ava, which is an emotion, Chazal felt, if you could care about your wife as much as you care about yourself, you're golden. That's fantastic. But covet that you give, that's behavioral. The covet you give to your wife has to surpass the covet you give for yourself, or you would want for yourself. And again, this is so beautiful. And one who leads his children in a proper path. So I'll say, these gemaras, like we could spend a week on these gemaras. What does it mean, madrich? What does it mean, madrich? What does it mean? What's a madrich? What's a madrich? A guide. What does a guide do? Shows you the way. Leads. Right? We'll say the most annoying guides are the ones who talk too much. You're like, just be quiet and move. Right? Talk. Right? Same thing in parenting. Effective parenting. Much less talking, much more doing. Be a madrich. Don't tell your kids what to do. Tell your kids what to do. Show them what to do. I will say, I know who I'm talking to over here, right? This is a motivated group. Whether your kids are asleep or not asleep, you think they don't know on some level that you're waking up early to come to shul, to learn, to daven b'tzibur, that you're moser nefesh. Giving up sleep is true. We joke about it, but it's tremendous mesiras nefesh. None of us are going to sleep at 8 o'clock at night. They were getting like a normal night's sleep, getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Madrich. It's all about the hadracha. You could say whatever you want. You could say a nice vart at the table. You could sing zemiras. You could do all that stuff. It's very nice. It's very beautiful. All important. The most important thing is how you lead. What is the example that you set? And if you lead your children by example on a derech yishara, that's parenting. Incredible. V'amasi and samach lapirkan. Marry them off early. Now both say, samach lapirkan, okay, this is really early. Right? Samach lapirkan means a little bit before they reach adulthood, right? Which again, today's day and age is about 25, right? So nice, right? So marry them off a little bit before they reach adulthood. I love Akasav Omer. So about such a person, we'll say, see, it's four ingredients over here. Number one, love your wife as much as you love yourself. If you can reach that, people like to say, oh, I love my wife more than I love myself. I love my kid. Chazal say, calm down, right? If you could love your wife as much as you love yourself, that's an accomplishment. That's an accomplishment, right? Love her as much as you love yourself. Number two, but give her more kavod, which is behavioral stuff. Give her more kavod than the kavod you take for yourself. Number three, don't tell your kids what to do, but be a madrich, be a good guide, be a good leader, show them what to do. And number four, marry your children off a little bit before adulthood. About those things, the pasuk says, "V'yadata ki shalom ohalecha upakaratan avecha v'lo techta." Pasuk says, "Know that Amiras Hashem, everything is going to be good for you. There's going to be peace in your tent, right? Pakaratan avecha, your home will be remembered for good, and ultimately, again, you will not come to sin." So the supposed to say, by the way, why is all of this brought down? Because again, we just saw before. The Gemara said that you shouldn't marry off your kid before adulthood. So what's happening over here? To which the Gemara says, no, it's not a kasha. It's not a kasha. The Gemara says, Samach lapir kan shiny. No. Ultimately, again, this is literally talking about right before they reach the age of adulthood. So again, they're on the cusp of adulthood. So lemaisa, again, that's not a big deal. When we're speaking about not marrying off your child as a katan, that's mamish when they were still very young. Incredible. We're going to stop over here for today. We're fine. Tomorrow's a very short daf. Amir Hashem. Kind of short daf. Looks like tremendous way to start the week. Shkayach, everyone. All right, Chevron Zoom, have a great day, everyone.